I think I've only got 3 more cups. Hold on. Mr. Clay and, no, I'm fine. 1 second. Sounds great.
I would love to try your tea.
Please let me know what you think.
It is delicious.
Only grows here. We've been tending this garden for generations.
You're drinking dead people tea?
Aren't we all?
Yeah, that's very true. But you're like cultivating dead people for good tea.
Aren't we all? Let me know, what can I do for you? Usually when people come here, it is because of some great tragedy. How may I alleviate your pain?
Oh, well, Herr Clay, we come to you with a great tragedy.
We recently lost one of our friends. And
People who come here usually have.
we aren't here to bury him. He's already in the ground. But we've come to avenge him, and we were hoping to find some help.
This is a place where we take the dearly departed people who have done well and people who have lived good lives, and we put them into earth that has been touched by the Wild Mother, and in turn she grants them with beauty and splendor and sometimes tea. wasn't. I've been on my own for a while. It makes you get a little rambly. Have you ever been in nature? Yes. Violence is extremely natural. Somewhere there's a plant that needs some compost, and I'm happy to make some more. Make people happy.
Good morning, stream. Howdy doody do this. Okay. Good morning, Luke.
Good morning, Dad.
What's up?
Hello, stream. Are you streaming?
Mm-hmm.
Yay. Oh, Dad, did you tell stream my joke I made at the Sanders last night? The Harry Potter one?
Hey, morning, Harry. Which joke?
The prefect
Oh my god. Go ahead.
one. Okay. So, a few Hogwarts girls were talking about the boys they liked. One of them said, "Don't you love Percy? He's so prefect."
Love you. Starting with chapter 30. Yeah, they look like mini-me's too. My genes definitely won when it came to our kids. Okay. I'm going to go refill my coffee, and then we're going to get recording. Oh, actually, first we're going to Bujo. All right, we're back. Check, check. All right. Yerrin, recording day 13, beginning as always with 30 seconds of silence, starting now. All right. Chapter 30. Yerrin, Chapter 30. Lauren sidled up beside Jormund as they walked. "What is your first order, O my captain?" She tried to put an indifference in her... Off to a great start. She tried to put an indifference in her tone that she did not feel. Jormund chuckled. "I am no captain, though who knows, if to not... I am no captain, though who knows, if tonight goes well, the Grand Chancellor might promote me. But my first instruction is that, once we are inside the palace, you should avoid the fighting at all cost." "That is an order I can follow easily," said Lauren. "How do you mean to sneak into the palace? We climbed the wall last time." "And that is still the best way in, but they will surely have redoubled the guard," said Jormund. "Therefore we mean to make a feint at the front gate. When they are distracted there, the larger part of our group will enter the same way you did last time. Once we are inside, Caradwen will lead us through the servants' passages to the king's quarters." Lauren frowned. "The main gate will be guarded. The mists will help, but surely they will still see us when we try to make the climb. We will be exposed." "But we will not be climbing for very long," said Jormund, smiling. "Yond here is a mind mage." He pointed to a man by his side. Yond did not look quite like Lauren thought a wizard should. He was too short and wide for that. But he smiled at her and lifted a hand, and his eyes began to glow. A dagger flipped up out of Lauren's belt to spin in midair. He had a voice like two stones grinding together. I shall get you on top of that wall quickly, girl. Yeah, all right. I shall get you on top of that wall quickly, girl. There we go. I shall get you up on top of that wall quickly, girl. He had a voice like two stones grinding together. I hope you can do your job after that. Lauren smiled at him before plucking her dagger out of the air and sheathing it once more. Soon they reached the palace. A wide main road ran in front of the walls, and they stood in the shadows on the other side. Mayhap 10 paces separated them from their target, 10 paces they would have to cross in the open air. Guards stood in the windows of the gatehouse and the towers, but there were also 2 guards on the street in front of the gate. The mists would help cover their approach, but they would be seen before they could sneak in. A thrill coursed through Lauren. It was the same feeling she had had just before they infiltrated and attacked Yawamba. She only hoped the results would be somewhat better this time. "Time to begin," said Jormund. They attacked. 10 of the mystics stormed forwards, drawing their swords, with Lauren and Jem close behind. They sounded no battle cries, and so the guards did not notice them until they were almost to the wall. Then a cry went up. 4 guards from above loosed a volley of arrows, but Jan's eyes flashed. The arrows scattered in midair, clattering to the cobblestones. Then the red cloaks reached the soldiers on the street. With the benefit of surprise, the mystics slew their foes quickly. Each fell, pierced by many swords. Jormund turned to Lauren and clasped his hands. "Boot," he grunted. Lauren placed her foot in his hands and leaped when he heaved. That sent her almost halfway up the wall, and then she felt an unseen force seize her under the arms. Jan's mind magic, she realized. The spell threw her the rest of the way, so that she did not even need to grip the top of the wall, but flew neatly over it to land on the other side of the ramparts. 1 guard was on the wall just outside the tower, and she barely had time to look surprised before Lauren attacked. The woman bore only a bow, and she could do nothing to block Lauren's punch. 3 times Lauren struck, and the woman collapsed to the ground. Jormund landed just behind her. At once he slammed his shoulder into the door of the gatehouse. It flew open, leading into the upper floor. 5 guards waited inside. 1 raised a sword, but Lewin One raised a sword, but Lauren threw a dagger into his arm and then grappled with another. Jormund's sword flashed, felling 2 of them. Lauren's opponent. Hey, what's up, Vale? Thanks so much. Lauren's opponent tried to overpower her, but she threw a foot behind the woman's and pushed her back. The guard's belch rang out in the night. The guard's head struck the wall and she fell senseless to the floor. But her I think I had a really weird mouth noise in there. The guard's head struck the wall and she fell senseless to the floor, but her companion attacked, forcing Lauren back with his sword. Jormund came to help after the first few wild swipes. His sword battered the other man's away, knocking it from his grip. Jormund plunged the blade through the man's chest, and he dropped. The gatehouse was clear. They ran to the wheels at either end. Jormund's meaty fists wrapped around the spokes, and he had the rear gate raised in only a few heartbeats. Lauren was slower, but he ran over to help her finish it. Soon the gates were up, and they heard shouting as the guards inside the courtyard realized the palace was exposed. By that time, 4 more mystics had made the climb, and they filed into the gatehouse. "Hold this place as long as you can," said Jormund. "But once you're sure it will fall, get out alive." The warriors moved to obey. 2 took up positions at the doors, while 2 others stood at arrow slits in the rear. They would be able to fire into the courtyard as the Danfon soldiers came to attack. "Our job here is done," said Jormund. "Now comes the greater task." He and Lauren took the stairs down and into the courtyard, immediately ducking through the gate and back out to the street. With a quick gesture, he motioned the rest of the mystics after him. There were 15 of them now, in addition to Lauren and her friends, and they made their way around to the same place where Lauren had infiltrated the palace last time. With the help of the Mind Mage, they made the climb far more quickly than they had before. No guards challenged them on the walls, for all had been summoned to fight at the front gate. They made their quick run around the They made their quick run across the side wall, and Lauren led them in their climb up to the balcony that would let them in. But this time the door was locked. "They have learned that much at least," said Lauren. "Pah!" said Jormund, grinning. "What good is a lock?" He rammed his massive shoulder into the door twice, and the jamb splintered as it flew open. They stormed into the palace, but now they turned the opposite direction from last time, for they were making for the servant passages. "Here," said Carrie. The girl's eyes were wide with fright, and her hands shook as she pointed out the right door, but her voice did not quiver. Lauren was impressed. Carrie had said she was fearful when Wojin attacked the palace, but she seemed to be handling this battle fairly well. Jormund threw open the door Carrie had pointed to. Inside was a servant, but before he could cry out, Jormund's meaty fist struck him senseless. Carrie directed them through the passageway, turning left and right as they made their way towards the king's chambers. The plan of attack was brilliant, Lauren realized, for it would be almost impossible to find them here. They were in the walls of the palace itself. Jesus Christ, somebody's driving a goddamn NASCAR car outside. The plan of attack was brilliant, Lauren realized, for it would be almost impossible to find them here. They were in the walls of the palace itself, and all attention would be diverted to the front gate. If Wojin feared any attack, he would expect it to come from the palace's front hall. The servants' passages would put them only a few rooms away from the king's chambers, and while they would no doubt be guarded, they would have bypassed the greater strength of Wojin's forces. Indeed, even the servants' chambers were surprisingly empty. She supposed most of them must have gone to bed already, and the rest were likely hiding after hearing of the battle in the courtyard. At last Carrie held up a hand. They all came to a stop in front of a simple wooden door, and Carrie turned to them. "This leads to the entrance to the keep," she said. "There is a small chamber and then a door, then stairs leading up into the keep itself, where the king's chambers will be found." "Good," said Jormund. "And the Yerrins?" "Once we climb the stairs, there is a passage leading away to the Yerrin apartments," said Carrie. "We will break off from the rest of you once we make the climb," said Lauren. "Very well," said Jormund. "If you have not returned by the time our deed is done, we will seek you out in case you need our aid." "I would appreciate that," said Lauren, thinking of Gregor. She hoped that he would have been pulled away from Damaris's side by the fighting, but that seemed too fortunate to be true. She hoped that he would have been pulled away from Damaris's side by the fighting, but that seemed too fortunate to be true. Jormund nodded and threw open the door. They rushed out of the hallway into a small chamber with doors on either side. 2 guards stood before them, but they could barely draw their swords before the mystics fell upon them. In a moment the guards were slain, and Jormund opened the door to the stairwell. The stairs turned back and forth twice before emerging onto a The stairs turned back and forth twice before emerging onto a landing before the king's chamber. Lauren saw the door leading to the side hallway and Damaris's chambers. They all paused for half a moment, and Jormund turned to look at her. "Good fortune, Nightblade," he said. "I will see you again soon." "Good fortune," said Lauren. She ran for the hallway door, Carrie and Jem on her heels, and threw it open. An arrow flew at her from the hallway beyond. Lauren dodged too late by reflex, but the arrow missed her anyway. She caught a glimpse of soldiers in Dortian livery, and then she fell to the floor on her back. Desperately, she kicked the door shut again. "Jormund!" she cried. "Wait!" She was too late. She heard the door to the king's chamber burst open, and the mystics... Oof. Rough today. She was too late. She heard the door to the king's chamber burst open, and the mystics gave great cries as they stormed in. "After them," said Lauren, pulling Carrie and Jem with her. They reached the door to the king's chamber not a moment too soon. Behind them, the hallway door burst open, and Dortian soldiers charged in, screaming. The opposite door flew open as well, and more soldiers came running from the other side. Lauren leaped into the king's chambers, Jem and Carrie close behind her, and threw the doors shut. The chambers were empty. There was a wide bed against the opposite wall, with great windows on either side of it, and many chairs and couches for the king to receive guests. But Wojin was not here, nor were any of his household guards. Jormund stood spinning in the center of the room, his sword drawn but impotent. "It is empty," he said slowly. "Jormund!" said Lauren. "Guards outside!" Jormund ran to her, and several mystics followed. They put their shoulders against the door, leaning into the force of the soldiers beyond, who had begun to batter it. "The bar!" said Jormund. His outthrust finger pointed at a bar for the door. 2 of the mystics heaved it up and placed it in its iron fittings, and then the rest of them fell back. The pounding and shouting from outside redoubled. Yond eyed the door, his face grim. "That will not hold long," he said. "When it falls, we fight," said Jormund. Lauren could scarcely believe it, but a smile split his lips. I do not think they will expect the Mind Mage.
Jormund, there are far too many of them, said Lauren. And where is Wojin?
They knew, said Jem quietly.
They guessed.
Yes, said Jormund. His smile did not falter as he looked down at Lauren. Yes, we have been thoroughly outwitted. Even if we could guess where Wojin has been moved to, we could never reach him, and certainly we could not surprise him. Lauren frowned up at him.
Then we must escape.
A huge blow crashed against the door. It rocked on its hinges. Jormund shook his head. A few more strikes like that, and they will be inside. We will never have enough time to get out. But you will. Take your friends and go.
This is not the time for some foolish last stand, said Lauren. Your death will not help the war with Dorsey. There are windows. We could...
Jormund only laughed. I told you, there is not enough time. You made your vow, Nightblade. You promised Cal you would obey me. Take Jem and Caradwen and get out. He looked down at her suddenly, and his smile went from fierce to wistful. I may not have been in Yowamba, but this is not such a bad trade. I hope you will make sure they talk about me and my soldiers here, in whatever stories they might tell about all this. Another blow crashed against the door. A large crack appeared in the bar holding it shut. Lauren bit her cheek until she could taste blood, fighting the stinging in her eyes.
Darkness take you, Jormund. Of course I will.
Then get out, you little twit. See to your friends. Stooping, he lifted a chair that must have weighed at least as much as Lauren, but which he hefted like a toy. He threw it through one of the chamber's wide windows. The explosion of splintering glass would have been deafening if Lauren had been able to focus on anything but the pounding at the door. Jormund reached out and ruffled Jem's hair, and then he took Lauren's shoulder and gave her a gentle push towards the window. She ran to them, pulling Carrie along behind her.
They will die, said Carrie, sounding half senseless.
Many have, said Lauren.
Many more will. The elves told you,
came a whisper in her mind, a memory of her dream.
They told you. They called you Nightblade, the one who walks with death.
Pieces of the puzzle, and always assembling themselves too late. There was no balcony outside the window, but there was a rooftop just a pace or two down. Lauren kicked out some of the glass at the bottom so that they would not cut themselves, and then she looked back at Jem and Carrie. Each of them nodded in turn. She took one last look back. Jormund and his mystics had their shoulders against the door now, and Yond looked to be bracing them with mind magic. Jormund looked back. Jormund looked back at Lauren, still wearing his mad grin.
Her berserker's grin, she thought, like Naya. Is that why I saw her here in my dreams?
Lauren turned and leaped. She came down hard on the tiles, Jem landing beside her a moment later. They both turned as Carrie made the leap, and Lauren did her best to catch the girl and soften her landing. Carrie was crying, but she did not hesitate as Lauren turned and led her running off down the rooftop.
Behind them they heard a great crash of splintering timber, and then a chorus of battle cries rang out. Almost at once, Lauren heard the sound of steel piercing flesh, like a butcher's cleaver sinking into a side of beef. Above it all, she heard Jormung's mighty shout, laughing as he cut down his foes. But the laughter faltered. One last cry he gave, and then fell silent a final time. They darted around the corner of the keep, and Lauren stuck her head back around it. No one had followed them out. She ducked out of sight again and looked about. The roof of the palace had many peaks and slopes that they could use to hide from sight. They stood in a sort of valley between two of the peaks, and a third was between them and the walls, blocking them from view. But they could not remain here forever. Their first goal had to be finding a way out. There must be other walls, barricades like the one they had used to enter the palace in the first place, but Lauren could not see any from where they stood.
"Carrie, do you have any idea where to go from here?" said Lauren.
The girl stood against the wall, her gaze distant. When she did not answer, Lauren put a hand on her shoulder. Carrie shook herself, then seemed to think for a moment, as though she was listening again to Lauren's words in her mind.
"No," she said at last. I know the palace, but not the rooftops. Jem?"
Lauren turned to the boy.
"I will search about,"
said Jem. He crouched and crept forwards, making for the slope closest to the outer wall. Lauren sat with Carrie, watching, hard in her throat. Jem poked his head up only far enough to peek with one eye, paused for a moment, and then slid back down towards them.
"Nothing easy that way," he said. "And more bad news. The walls are now well guarded. I see many soldiers with bows."
Lauren shook her head. There had been few guards when they infiltrated the palace. Wojan or Damaris must have commanded the guards to hide themselves until the mystics were inside. Then they would emerge, leaving Lauren and her friends trapped.
"Damaris outwitted us again,"
she said.
"No one is that clever,"
said Carrie, voice trembling.
"You do not know her very well," said Lauren. "But then you do not know me very well either. We will escape this place alive. I swear it."
Carrie nodded, and despite her fear, Lauren could see that the girl wanted to believe her. She vowed to herself that she would not let them She vowed to herself that she would not let her down, or Jem either, even if it cost her everything. Everything. Lauren froze where she sat. Realization came crashing down on her like a wave, robbing her of breath. For a moment it sapped her will, and she felt as if rising to her feet would be an impossible task. But she shook her head, clearing the feeling away. She knew what she must do.
"Carrie,"
she said, her voice wooden,
"where is the treasury from where we are?"
Carrie opened her mouth to answer, but Jem spoke first.
"I think I saw it just over that slope. It lies between us and the outer wall. We can reach its rooftop, but that ends a good 10 paces before the outer wall. We cannot use it to escape."
"Not the roof,"
said Lauren.
"Follow me."
She crept up the slope and saw what Jem had described. From the peak, the roof ran down a short ways before ending. There was a small gap, easy to leap, and then the roof of the treasury. High in the treasury wall were windows, somewhat small, but large enough to slip through. A pale light shone from within. Lanterns or torches were lit inside, but not many. Mayhap even just one. That meant that if there were any guards below, they would be few.
"Follow me," said Lauren. "Do not stop for anything."
Lauren slid down the rooftop towards its lip. She kept a wary eye on the wall far beyond, but the guards there had no hope of seeing them in the darkness. They carried torches, yes, but the light could never reach this far, and would only keep the guards blind to the shadows. At the rooftop's edge, she did not stop herself. Instead, she jumped as hard as she could, curling and striking the window with her shoulder. The glass shattered easily under her weight, and she thrust out an arm to catch herself. It caught on the lip. She felt This is a good moment to mention, just as an awareness point, that the rest of this chapter and the whole next chapter are pretty intense. So if you're not having a great day, or if you don't deal well with violence, blood, grief, loss, all that sort of stuff, might be a moment to tune out. I'm going to have a hard time with it. So, anyway, watch out for yourself. She felt glass bite into her skin, but not deep. Most of it fell tinkling to the floor below. She hung there, breath hissing through her teeth against the pain in her hand. There below them was the treasury, seemingly endless piles of gold and silver, both coin and otherwise. The riches stretched from one wall to the other, but there were no guards to watch them. Only one figure waited for them down below. Even in the grip of the dream sight, Lauren's heart quailed. The figure was tied to a chair, its head hanging down, like Doris had been. But it was not Doris. She forced her thoughts back to the present and reached up, using the She forced her thoughts back to the present and reached up, using the hilt of a dagger to knock away the rest of the glass from the bottom of the windowsill. Jem and Carrie would follow at any moment, and she did not want them to injure themselves. Then she fell, aiming for a shelf just below her. It rocked under her weight, but it did not fall. From there she clambered down. Above her, Jem reached the window, and then Carrie. Each of them began to climb down the same way Lauren had. Lauren ignored them. She walked slowly across the floor to the figure in the chair. Blood soaked his clothing, running down the chair to pool on the floor. But his throat was not cut. He still lived. And at the sound of her approaching footsteps, he turned his face up to her. Chet. No. And at the sound of her approaching footsteps, he turned his face up to her. Chet. Chapter 31. Yerrin, Chapter 31. Chet gasped at the sight of her. Lauren fell on her knees beside his chair, slashing at his bonds with her dagger. His arms came free, but he could not support his own weight. He slumped forwards, falling hard out of the chair to hit the stone floor. He had been cut, tortured. Lauren had seen a great deal of cruelty since leaving the Birchwood, but this was among the worst of it. In her mind's eye, she saw Damaris here, a sharp knife in her hand. No dream sight, but only a product of her own imagination, her knowledge. Damaris with Chet, kneeling beside him, behind him. Damaris, plying his skin, slicing the flesh beneath. Damaris, avoiding the veins so that he did not bleed to death too soon. Damaris, taking her time, making it last. Damaris, smiling all the while. "Chet," said Lauren. She rolled him over. "Chet, Chet." She threw off her cloak, balling it up and putting it beneath his head. Suddenly she realized she was touching him, her hands on his shoulder, his neck, his head. But he was almost senseless, and he could hardly withdraw from her even if he wanted to. "No!" gasped Jem. Lauren looked up. The boy stood a pace away, looking down at Chet, his face a mask of horror. But Carrie pushed past him, kneeling at Chet's side across from Lauren. Without hesitation, she tore Chet's shirt open to inspect his wounds. Where before the girl had been shaking with fear at their plight, now her hands were steady as she probed the cuts. Chet groaned at each touch of her fingers, but she only inspected him for a short moment before she looked up at Lauren. She shook her head. Lauren's mouth worked, looking for words. She found none and looked back down at him. "Lauren," he gasped. His eyes opened, and they were clear. Lauren withdrew her hands from him at once. "I am here," she said. "I am here, Chet. I came." "How did you—" he coughed. Blood bubbled from between his lips. His face was bruised. She thought his nose must be broken. His red-matted hair stuck out in all directions. "How did you know where I was?" "I did not," said Lauren. We were running. I knew I had to come here." It seemed as if he tried to nod, but the movement only made him grimace in pain. "The dreams." "Yes," she whispered. Chet began to weep. Hot tears slid... Hot tears slid down his cheeks, mingling with the blood, and silent sobs made his chest jerk. It hurts. Yet at the same time, it is like I cannot feel it. Once she started, she would not stop, no matter what I said." Lauren did not have to ask who he meant. Damaris. "How did she find you?" "I did not make it beyond sight of the city," said Chet. "They caught me. Gregor, some others. The moment they appeared, I froze, limp, like a fawn when a wolf seizes its throat. And it was like I knew that it would happen, that it was inevitable. The elves, they told you. I thought about it all the way back to the city, trussed up on Gregor's saddle." Carrie looked at Lauren in shock. Lauren ignored her. The elves' words rang in her mind. The one who walks with death. A wave of pain struck him, and he cried out. His hand gripped his shirt. Lauren squeezed her fingers together until she thought they would break, keeping herself from taking his hand, holding him, touching his face. Not now. She would leave him alone for now, at least. Until after. She forced herself to be calm, forced away the despair that clawed at her mind, her soul. She must be strong. For him, not for herself. "It hurts," he whispered again. Lauren's hand went to the hilt of her dagger. Not one of her throwing daggers, the dagger on the back of her belt, finely crafted, with black designs made of magestone. The dagger Chet had used to kill Auntie. "I could help," she whispered. I can end it. The pain would stop." And deep within her heart, she knew she would. If he asked her to, she would. It would be the first time. It would be the first life she had ever taken on purpose, but she would do it, to keep him from more pain. "No," he gasped. "It is. I can feel that it is almost over. If I only have a few moments left, I would rather spend them with you." Fresh tears sprang from his eyes, but they were different. His face contorted in grief, not pain. "Do not worry," said Lauren. "I will not leave." "No, he gasped against a fresh wave of pain before he could go on. "I told her, Damaris. I told her everything. Your dreams, the elves, your dagger, what it means to the mystics." Lauren quailed. She had thought that nothing could overwhelm her grief, but now terror came flooding in to replace it. It was the secret she had held ever since Wellmont, when Jordell had first told her all the secrets of the dagger. That knowledge in the hands of Damaris. But she forced such thoughts away. There would be time to deal with that. There would be no more time to spend with Chet. "It is all right," she said, determined not to let him see her fear. "You could have done nothing more." I did not tell her where Cal was," he whispered. It was the... It was the only thing I could hold on to, and I had told her so much already. When I lied at last, she believed me. "That was brave," she said. "That was brave, Chet. You saved many lives." She forced away thoughts of Jormund, of all the mystics who had died in the palace just moments ago. Chet knew nothing of them. He did not need to. "I am glad they will live," he whispered. "Glad I could do that much, at least." "You have done so much more," said Lauren. A ragged gasp racked his body. Suddenly his hand shot out to clutch hers. Lauren looked down at her hand in shock. His fingers laced through hers. His blood still ran from wounds on his fingers, and it mixed with the blood of her sliced palm. She held him back, squeezing, giving him an anchor. It hurts," he gasped. You deserve better, but please." "What, Chet?" she said. "I have water, "No," he whispered. "Please. Hold me." She lifted him up at once, lifted him to sitting, ignoring the grunt of pain. Carrie opened her mouth as if to speak, but she held herself back. Doubtless this would worsen the wound. But what did it matter? It would be over soon anyway. It would all be over. Chet's arms snaked around her back, but slowly, and she stroked his hair. He buried his face in her shoulder, and she squeezed, letting him feel her, letting him feel her arms around him. He turned his head, and she pulled back, thinking she was smothering him. But he kissed her. Softly. Briefly. She returned it. No passion, no lust. No time for that now. But she poured all of her love into it, into that brief moment of the meeting of her lips. But she poured all of her love into it, into that brief moment of the meeting of their lips. And then they held each other again. Chet shuddered, and then she felt it, like a felled animal in the woods where Chet had taught her to hunt in the first place. She felt the life slip from him. He was gone. Gone to where she could not follow him any more. Okay, I need a minute. Okay. This is fun. We having fun yet? So much fun.
I need another minute. All right. Chapter 32. Yerrin, Chapter 32. The treasury fell to silence. The only sounds were the muted voices of guards in the courtyard and on the walls outside, still no doubt searching for Lauren and her friends, and the quiet, racking sobs of Jem. But after a short while had passed, Carrie reached over and put her hand on Lauren's shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said, "but we are still in danger." "I know," said Lauren. "I know." Gently she laid Chet down, then took her cloak and stood to don it. She refused to look at him. They had to leave him here. Lauren hated it, but she knew she must. She went to Jem's side and put an arm around his shoulders. He turned to her and threw his arms around her, weeping, his tears soaking into her fine new shirt. "The front door will be guarded," said Carrie quietly. "But we might fight our way out. It is the only thing I can think of." "There is no need," said Lauren. She gingerly unwrapped Jem's arms from around her waist, and then she went to the corner of the room. A tapestry hung there. Lauren remembered it. The man in black had shown it to her. She pushed it aside, and there was only a blank stone wall. Kneeling, Lauren felt for the chink in the stone. After a moment she found it, and her fingers pulled on the lever. 2 stones swung open, revealing the passageway. Carrie gawked at her. "How did—" "I am the Nightblade," said Lauren. Then she remembered what the man in black had said in her dream. "It is my job to know the secret ways no one else knows." She led the way, crawling into the passage. Jem came behind her, still sniffling, and Carrie brought up the rear. Soon the passageway was completely black. Lauren reached into her cloak and pulled out a magestone, breaking off a piece and eating it. Then she reached to the back of her belt and drew her dagger, holding it in one hand as she proceeded. With the magestone in her blood and her hand on the dagger, the passageway was suddenly bright as day. "I cannot see," said Carrie. "You do not need to," said Lauren. "There is only one way out." Only one way out. She crawled forwards, following the passageway as it turned left and right, warning her friends each time. Soon it sloped up, and she knew they were near the end. At last it came. She reached up, finding the chink in the stone and pulling the lever. The wall swung out soundlessly. Lauren crawled out into the open. They were in the palace.
The hallway was wide and tall, and there were many doors in it. To their left, Lauren thought she saw the hallway reach the main front hall, while to the right it ended in a door. But in the middle there was a side hallway leading deeper into the palace. "I know where we are. The front doors are that way." Carrie pointed to the left. "If the mystics still hold the front gate, they do not," said Lauren. "They will have left, or they are already dead. This way." She started off for the side hallway. "How do you know?" said Carrie. But she followed along, Jem by her side. "It is enough that I do." How could she begin to explain? Lauren led them on the course she had been shown. They walked down hallways that felt familiar to Lauren by now, though she had never seen them in the waking world. The dream sight still had its hold on her, but it was not like before. Now, seeing the places from her dreams did not disorient her or send her mind spinning. Now it was like she was following a route marked on a map. She turned the final corner, and there it was, as she had known it would be. Ahead, an open door leading to a dining hall, and beyond that, freedom. To the left, a small wooden door led to a serving room. Lauren came to a halt. "There," said Carrie. "That gate is open. We can escape." "Take Jem with you," said Lauren. "I must go another way." They both stopped short. Carrie looked over her shoulder, towards the hallway that ran to the front of the palace. Voices drifted from that direction, far away but coming closer. "What do you mean?" she said. "What other way?" "Lauren," Jem began. "Shush," said Lauren. "You and Carrie must go into the dining hall. Wait at the other end for a short while, then run for the city. You will be able to escape. I swear it." Jem set his jaw. "I will not leave. Not without you. Not after Chet." "That way is for others, but not for you." Oh, no, I think that was Mako. No, that is Naya. "That way is for others, but not for you," Naya's voice came in her mind. "You are not leaving me," said Lauren. "But there is one thing I must do first before I follow you." He paused. "What thing?" Lauren gave him a sad smile and gently pushed his shoulder. "Never you worry, Master Urchin. But I swear this now. I will find you back at Kyle's hideout. I would not leave you and Annis to fend for yourselves." Jem looked up into her eyes, studying them. "Poor Jem," thought Lauren. "You cannot recognize a lie in my eyes. In Damaris and Auntie I met two of the most cunning minds in the 9 kingdoms, and they could not tell if I spoke the truth. What hope do you have?" "Very well," said Jem slowly. "I believe you." "Of course you do," she said. "Now go. Look after Carrie." His chest puffed up a bit at that. Over his head, Lauren caught Carrie's eye and winked. The girl gave a smile, little more than a small twist of the lips. Carrie had one advantage over Jem. She had not known Lauren long enough to think she knew when Lauren was telling the truth. Jem led the way into the dining hall, but Carrie paused for just a moment. "You had better not have lied to that boy," she said quietly. "I will expect you back at the hideout." Lauren nodded solemnly. Then she turned and ducked into the serving room, pausing for just a moment to ensure that Carrie went to follow Jem. Inside, she found the room laid out just as she had known it would be. Against the back wall was the shelf of dishes. Lauren threw it away from the wall, not caring about the clatter it made. She was past that now. The passageway beyond led to the ladder, and that led to the passageway above. That ended in a tapestry, and Lauren pulled it aside. She stepped into Gregor's room. He stood at the other end, framed by the open doorway. In his hand was a massive longbow of yew, longer than He stood at the other end, framed by the open doorway. In his hands was a massive longbow of yew, longer than Lauren was tall. He faced away from her, scanning the courtyard below. The room was modest by Damaris's standards, but still held finery beyond anything Lauren had ever seen growing up. The tapestry through which she had emerged was matched by one on the other side of the room, and all the furniture was carved of solid oak, inlaid with finely wrought gold. There were many lanterns around the room, but only 3 were lit, leaving the whole place dim. They were the only illumination, for outside the night was still misty and clouded. The moons and stars cast no glow upon the room, nor even upon Gregor himself. Lauren turned and closed the door to the passageway, making no effort to mask the sound. Gregor's head snapped up, and he turned to her. For a long moment he stood there, studying her. Then, inexorable as a rock slide, he stepped into the room. One hand drifted behind him, closing the glass balcony door. He pulled a sash holding back a curtain, and it fell across the door, sealing the room against the last rays of torchlight from beyond. "This is the only way," thought Lauren. "All roads lead to Gregor." "Hello, Nightblade." Nope. Hello. Hello, Nightblade. There we go. This is where Gregor lives. Hello, Nightblade. Damaris promised me this, that together we would make you suffer, and then at last I would get to kill you. Hello, Nightblade, said Gregor. His voice rolled through the room like thunder. Damaris promised me this, that together we would make you suffer, and then at last I would get to kill you. Okay. I'm going to refill my coffee real fast. Be right back. Chapter 33. Yerrin, Chapter 33.
I thought I might find you here, said Lauren lightly.
Gregor snorted. Did you? But he paused, and his eyes hardened to steel. Ah, the boy told us things. Your dreams. Did they lead you here to die? Hardly a useful tool.
Lauren shrugged, letting her gaze drift around the room. Across the room was the only other door. It led to the rest of the palace. To escape. She turned away from it. They have proven more useful than you might realize. After all, they have told me where to find your mistress.
The bodyguard froze. Lauren widened her eyes.
Oh, did you not imagine I would know that? That I had not planned all this? While you waste your time here with me, mystics are even now descending on Damaris's location and—
Gregor charged. Lauren had expected it, but the giant's speed never failed to surprise her. She leaped away from the tapestry, making for the room's door. But Gregor anticipated the move, and his hand swiped out. Lauren dropped and rolled, but her foot overextended, kicking a side table. One of the lamps fell to the floor, shattering its glass. The light went out, and the room went dimmer still. Quickly, Lauren scrambled for her feet. But Gregor was almost upon her, and she had to roll away from the door. He paused there, shoulders hunched, arms to his side. Lauren thanked the sky that he did not have his sword on him.
You did not plan this night, he growled. If you had, you would never have left Chet for us to kill.
You have no right to speak his name, hissed Lauren. But she thought, even now, Jem and Carrie will be making their way across the courtyard. Almost there, almost free. She circled, keeping her eyes fixed on Gregor. It almost made her forget his longbow, which he had dropped. Her foot hit it, and she nearly tripped. Gregor tensed, but when she righted herself, he subsided. In one fluid motion, Lauren crouched and picked up the bow. It felt like a spear in her hands. If only she were Uzo.
Do you think that will save you, girl? Said Gregor. That little stick?
Cruel words, said Lauren. After all, it is your little stick.
I just realized that if I had a nickel for every time somebody was fighting Gregor in the Underrealm books and made a veiled joke about his dick, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Gregor growled and charged again. Lauren leaped to the side, swinging the longbow at him. He raised an arm to block it, and it cracked over his forearm. Grunting in pain, he swung his other fist at her. Lauren could not quite dodge it. It smashed into her shoulder, flinging her across the room. She rolled with the landing, fighting to her feet at once. In one hand she still held half of the longbow. The broken end was jagged and splintered. She thrust it at Gregor, forcing him back.
I think I am at a disadvantage, she said. If only I had learned to fight. I tried to get you to teach me once. Do you remember? I begged you for swordplay lessons. But then, as now, you could not quite catch me. Will you not give me a sword again? It is the only way this fight will be fair.
Who wants a fair fight? Said Gregor. I have only one goal here tonight, to end your life, and to take as long as I can in doing so.
They had spun around each other again, and now the balcony door was behind Lauren. She reversed her grip on the longbow, throwing it at him like a spear. He batted it aside, but she had not truly meant to hit him. Lauren turned, dashing for the balcony. She threw aside the curtain, her hand coming down on the latch. It did not turn. Locked. A fist bigger than her head closed on the hood of her cloak. This is it. Gregor flung her away from the door. She flew all the way across the room, crushing another lamp. Lauren felt a sharp pain, broken glass or a cracking rib, and gasped. Then she smiled. Rolling over, she saw Gregor stalking towards her. He wanted to get his hands on her, pin her down, but he was moving slowly. He did not want to give her another chance to escape. Lauren's hand fell to her belt, closing around a knife. She drew it and threw. Gregor halted, raising one mailed arm to stop the blade, but it flew straight past him, to strike the third and final lamp, sending it crashing to the floor. The room went utterly black. Lauren drew the dagger from the back of her belt. In her vision, the room grew bright as daylight. But Gregor was blind, and he would not know she could see. Chet would not have told him, for Lauren had never told Chet. She had not wanted him to know about the Magestones. Gregor took a cautious step back. His leg struck a footstool, and he stumbled, barely keeping his feet. Experimenting, Lauren scuffed a foot on the floor. Gregor's head jerked towards the sound, but too far so that he was looking to her left. Lauren's smile widened. "You misunderstand the dreams," said Lauren. He jerked again, following her voice. She let him hear where she was. "They tell me some things, but not everything. They did not tell me I would find Damaris alone in Yawamba, that you had abandoned her. And no, they did not tell me you would take Chet tonight. But if you think they did not tell me about you, here, now, you are wrong." Gregor made his cautious way forwards, reaching for where he could hear her voice. "I came here, Gregor, because I wanted to." Softening her footfalls, she began to stalk around him. On the soft rugs of the room, she made... "Hey, Lady Temeraire. Hope you're having a good morning. We've cried a lot this morning. Such cry. And thank you so much for the gift sub. I really appreciate it. Oh, Lordy Lord. Yeah, we had to have a whole total breakdown, curl up on the floor of the recording booth cry this morning. So we're having a great time. Softening her footfalls, she began to stalk around him. On the soft rugs of the room, she made less noise than the wind. Gregor swiped his arms through where she had been standing a moment before. "This is pointless," he growled. "Do you think the darkness is your friend? It will not help when I get my hands on you." From behind, Lauren leaped. She plunged the dagger into his calf. The blade parted cloth and flesh with equal ease. It felt... Lauren shuddered. It felt so good, so right. Had she really never used the dagger on another living person before? She knew now. That had always been the dagger's purpose. It was never meant for anything else. She leaped back, even as Gregor groaned and stumbled to one knee. He reached behind himself, but she was already gone. Lauren darted in again. Her blade impaled his groping forearm. Gregor gave a brief shout, quickly cut off. He tried to rise, but he had to favor his injured leg. It was useless, unable to support his weight. He swung a wild, angry blow that Lauren ducked with ease. She struck again, plunging the dagger into the pit of his good arm. It fell Excuse me. Wait, where am I? She struck again, plunging the dagger into the pit of his good arm. It fell useless to his side. He placed her at last, and his fingers closed on the front of her shirt. But she had already stabbed that arm through. Now she sliced it again. She did not know where to cut exactly, but the dagger seemed to. It parted muscle and tendon, and his grip slackened. His balance wavered, and he crashed to the floor on his back. Desperately, he tried to push away from her with his one good leg. Lauren took one of the throwing daggers from her belt and flung it into his ankle. It flew hard enough to pin the limb to the floor beneath.
And here I thought...
Gregor's words cut off in a groan of pain.
Here I thought you had no spine.
The words were defiant, his tone more so, but Lauren could see it plain as day on his face, clear as if a lantern were right in his eyes. Fear. Gregor feared her. His chest heaved with every breath, and sweat ran from him in rivulets. She wondered how long it had been since the giant had been beaten in a fight, beaten so soundly that even his limbs were useless, if it had ever happened at all.
"You thought me weak for refusing to kill," said Lauren. "You still do not recognize the truth. Murder is the coward's way out."
He grunted a laugh.
What do you call this, then?
A fierce smile crossed Lauren's lips.
"I suppose I do not feel particularly brave at the moment."
That forced a laugh from him.
Then I go to my death with one consolation. This pain is nothing compared to the boys, to Chet's.
He gave an evil grin into what was, to him, empty darkness.
I made sure he suffered. I relished every twist of pain on his face as I cut him up, one piece at a time. If I must go to the darkness below, I do so happy, knowing that nothing will ever bring back the boy you loved, the boy I took from you.
Lauren crossed to kneel by his head. She leaned in close.
"I know you are lying."
He started at the sound of her voice so close. Only one arm could still move, and he swung it at her, even though it could not grip. She caught his hand on the blade of her knife. Gregor cried out, a scream of pain that she was ashamed of herself for enjoying.
"I know you are lying,"
she said again, easily, as though nothing had happened.
"I saw Chet. He died slowly, yes, but not by your hand. When Annis and I first met, she told me. She told me how Damaris would torture information from her prisoners, taking her time with the pain, enjoying every cut. It was Damaris who killed him. And I promise you this, I will hunt her down. I will never stop until I find her. And when I do, I will not bring her before the king's justice. I am the king's justice. I will find Damaris and end her, just as I have ended you here tonight."
It dawned on Gregor. Recognition. Lauren watched it spread across his face like a tide creeping up ashore. He knew she spoke the truth, that she meant what she said. It was only a matter of time before Damaris was dead. And just as that realization came upon him, Lauren drew the dagger across his throat. He sagged back to the floor, his lifeblood bubbling up. He coughed, choked, trying desperately to breathe. Blood spurted across his face and ran down the sides of his neck to pool, soaking into the carpet below, staining it. Like Duris. Like Chet. Fuck it. One more. Chapter 34. Yerrin, Chapter 34. Lauren sank back on her heels, staring. The Maidstones and her dagger let her see every detail of Gregor's corpse. It sat there, silent, still, confronting her. A sick, twisting feeling ripped through her gut. She ignored it. Cal had given her a mission, and she was still in the palace. First, she went to the balcony and opened the door. The courtyard beyond was still empty, but guards stood on the wall beyond it. They did not notice her, but they soon would. Lauren ducked back into the room and went to Gregor. She lifted his arm and pulled, but she could not move him. Clenching her jaw, she heaved. His body barely moved. I got to go to the bathroom. Going to go. Be right back. Here we go. Let's do this. She went to the rug upon which he lay and seized the edge of it. Again she pulled. This time it worked. The rug slid on the wooden floor. It still seemed to her that he should be too heavy, but something, the thrill of the fight, some gift of the dagger, let her move him. On the balcony she lifted his head up until it hung over the railing. Then, straining and groaning, she managed to fling him over the balcony to land in the courtyard far below. The body struck the smooth white stones with a sick thud. That drew the attention of the guards on the wall. They cried out, and soon other guards came running from all directions. Soon there was a small crowd of them in the courtyard below, staring at Gregor's corpse. As one, they joined the guards on the wall in looking up at her. Lauren threw her shoulders back. Her black cloak and her new clothes were all stained in blood. She hoped they could see it. "Gregor is dead," she proclaimed. "Damaris of the family Yerrin is soon to follow, and the usurper Wojin will never escape the king's justice. Abandon him, or you too will face me before the end." Then she vanished back inside the apartment. She left by the front entrance, not the secret one. Soon there was a staircase leading down, and she emerged into another hallway full of rooms. One of them had an open door, and she stole through it to the balcony beyond. This led her to the rooftops she had traveled with Jem and Carrie not long ago. She stalked around the palace's perimeter, stopping to look and listen at every window. Then, at last, she found the one she was looking for. A balcony just above her head led to a wide glass door. Pulling herself up slightly, Lauren saw Wojin. The false king was in an urgent conference with an advisor, and Lauren saw 2 guards inside the room as well. A single lamp lit the room, but none of them were looking at her, and in any case the lamp inside the room would keep them from seeing outside. She clambered up onto the balcony, sidling up to the doorway to listen. Wojin raised his head to speak to the guards. Kidding me? Oh, right. What of the attackers? At least one still remains, Your Grace. You must stay here until we have confirmed the palace is secure. Wojin gave an exasperated sigh. This gambit was foolish. I told that Yerrin woman often enough, and she is not even here to face the same danger as the rest of us. Damaris, thought Lauren. She has left, then. Mayhap it is time for me to go as well. Her gaze came to rest on Wojin. Or mayhap not. Lauren burst through the door into the room. Wojin shot to his feet, and the guards went to draw their swords. But Lauren struck before they could, kicking over the lamp. It was not complete darkness, for the window let some torchlight in, but it was enough for her purposes. One guard fell to a punishing blow from her dagger's hilt. The other... Hey, what's up, Julie? Good to see you again. I'm doing quite well. We're having a fun morning. I spent a lot of it crying. One guard fell to a punishing blow from her dagger's hilt. The other only managed 2 swings before Lauren brought him down. The advisor screamed and ran for the door, but Lauren tackled him, then slammed his head into the floor to knock him senseless. But no killing, she thought. There has been enough of that tonight. Lauren rose to her feet. "Wojin," she said, "what a pleasure to meet you face to face." Assassin," gasped Wojin. "No," said Lauren, shaking her head, "but I have killed Gregor tonight, and you are utterly at my mercy. Yet I was told, a long time ago, that not needlessly does the family Yerrin kill, and the Nightblade has at least that much honor." Wojin swallowed hard. She watched the bulb in his throat bounce up and down. What do you mean to do with me, then?" "Silence you, for one thing." She cut a gag out of the drapes and tied it around his mouth. Then she bound his hands before leading him out to the balcony. Once he was up against the railing, she shoved him in the shoulder blades. Wojin screamed into his gag as he fell, but she caught him by the ankles. Lauren lowered him as far as she could, then dropped him to the rooftop below so that he fell on his shoulder. He grunted in pain. Lauren jumped down beside him, then forced him up and back towards the palace. She bundled... Ugh. Lauren jumped down beside him, then forced him up and back towards the palace. She bundled him in through a lower window. "We are going to your dungeons," she said. "If you try to signal for help, I will make you regret it." Wojin nodded in fear, but she saw a crafty shine in his eye. That is a loud car. Oh, thanks, Julie. For the record, we spent a portion of this morning crying because we recorded an extremely sad death scene. Wojin nodded in fear, but she saw a crafty shine in his eye. The dungeons would be guarded, and they would not be easy to escape from. That was the point, after all. No doubt he hoped he could trick her into trapping herself there. Good. It would keep him thinking he had a way out of this. The maps of the palace were still somewhat clear in her mind. She knew she was on the southwest end of the palace and the dungeons were close by. She only needed to find a way leading down. There. She shoved Wojin into a stairwell, barely catching him before he fell to the landing below. When they were near the bottom, she stopped and knelt, tying Wojin's feet as she had tied his hands. "Do not move," she said. "I will return for you in a moment." She ducked around the final turn in the stairs. Behind her, she heard Wojin start to struggle immediately. That was fine. He would not free himself before she was done. There was a guard room before the door that led to the dungeons themselves. In the room sat a man in palace livery. He shot to his feet when Lauren entered, giving a cry of alarm. Lauren threw a dagger into the hand that reached for his sword, then subdued him with 2 quick strikes to the face. He slumped to the floor, groaning. His belt held a ring of keys. She removed them and went back for Wojin. His bonds were not even loosened yet. He moaned in fear as she hauled him up and shoved him into the guard room. She unlocked the first door and walked him down the line of cells, peering inside. There. A cell of healthy prisoners, clearly not here for very long. Their hair was cut short, and they were well-muscled and healthy. "You there," said Lauren. "Are you palace guards?" One of the prisoners peered up at her, blinking. "What?"
Palace guards. Did you serve in the palace?"
"I did," said the man. "Who are you?" Then he noticed Wojin, bound and with Lauren's arm around his neck. His eyes shot wide.
"Yes, it is him," said Lauren. "I am looking for someone. Morana of the family Fey. Where is she?"
"I am Morana," said a voice. Lauren turned. The cell across the hall held still more prisoners. One of them, a woman with her hair cut almost to her scalp, stood before the bars. She studied Lauren with keen, severe eyes Lauren had seen before in the face of Duris Fey. Lauren reached up and whipped out. Lauren reached up and ripped out Wojin's gag.
"Tell them what you did." "I do not know what you speak of,"
said Wojin desperately. Lauren's dagger slid free, and she pressed the tip to his throat.
"Not needlessly will I kill, but neither will I be gentle. Tell them what you did to King Jun."
Wojin gasped, trying to struggle away from the dagger.
"I killed him,"
he whispered.
"Louder!" "I killed him!"
cried Wojin.
"I took the palace by force, but he and his son escaped. But I found them after, and my soldiers killed Jun."
Lauren pressed harder. The dagger prickled the skin of his throat, and Wojin squeaked.
"And tell her what happened to Duris. Damaris learned that she was conspiring with King Jun,"
said Wojin, nearly weeping now.
We killed her."
Lauren pressed just a bit harder.
"Tell them everything. Tell her how Duris died." "Damaris put her to the question,"
cried Wojin.
"She tortured her for information before cutting her throat."
Morana had gone very still, her fingers wrapped around the iron bars of her cell. She met Lauren's gaze.
"Do you know who else in this dungeon is loyal to Jun?" said Lauren.
"I do," said Morana, her tone clipped.
Lauren removed her dagger and threw Wojin to the floor, where he crumpled in a heap.
She opened Morana's cell and handed her the ring of keys.
"Get them all out. Take care of this thing."
She spat at Wojin's form on the floor.
"I will send help as soon as I can. Senlin still lives. He will return to give you orders. Can you hold out until then?"
"We can," said Morana. But as Lauren turned to go, she reached out and seized her wrist.
"You did all this?"
Lauren met her gaze for a moment.
"Not on my own,"
she said softly.
"Many people died to return the true king to the throne. See that their sacrifice was not in vain."
Morana nodded slowly. Lauren turned and ran back up the stairs, into the palace. Okay. Good day of recording. We've only got 2 chapters left. We'll finish this tomorrow easily. Easily. Oh, boy. Oof. Okay.
Let's see who we're rating today. I suppose we'll raid Wordwin. Gonna catch up on my journal real quick. And I will be back tomorrow for another early stream. And we will finish recording the audiobook and send it off to the editor. Which, you know, that's pretty exciting. We like that. Tomorrow should be a slightly longer stream. I might see what I'm working on after that. I might start recording Life Mage Dawning tomorrow. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But in any case, thanks for being here. I'm going to throw you over to Wordwin and say hi to him for me. And I will catch you next time. Peace, everyone. Bye.